Hello everyone, and welcome to this very impromptu video, iPhone video no less, that the spirit called me to make today because I'm actually toward the very end of the first leg of my book tour, and today was basically the only day in 2 weeks that I am neither traveling nor hosting an event nor doing something else for work, and I was just going to chill out and enjoy my hotel room all day because I'm in a particularly unwalkable city, so there's not a ton to do. But you know what? I said I have been seeing something trending on my TikTok feed in particular that I feel like is so relevant to the video essay that we just dropped on Tuesday, that I simply must say something, and this is kind of something that I was thinking anyway that got kind of cut from the script just for time because we were already over an hour. But I think is just so relevant and so important to focus on. So if you missed it, the video essay was about how essentially everything in our day-to-day consumer experience has gotten quite cheap over the past few decades, and yet in many cases is just as expensive or more expensive than it used to be. That's everything from, travel to home decor to the actual homes we live in to food to, in the case of this video, our clothing. And clothing actually might be the most pertinent example because it's also an example where the relationship between the quality of products that we're buying and the price of those products has become kind of completely decoupled. And I don't know about you guys, but I have been seeing quite a bit of content about the Rose sample sale, which I think is sort of a perfect encapsulation of so many of the different things that we touched on in that video that I think are really important to remind ourselves as we navigate this increasingly sort of nonsensical dystopian consumer landscape, especially as women, because unfortunately, a lot of this stuff is targeted to us. This is not to say that men are never targeted by consumerism or that they are not targeted by pretty fundamentally financially unhealthy things. Like, let's be clear, they are also being relentlessly bombarded with advertisement for like crypto and online sports betting. That one we're slightly spared from as a gender comparatively. But we do have the problem as women of being just kind of relentlessly marketed consumer products that we don't need in an effort to sort of convey beauty, status, in-group belonging, all of that kind of thing. And in a world where the price that we pay for something not only doesn't necessarily guarantee that we will get meaningful use out of what we're buying or be fulfilled by it or what have you, but it also doesn't even guarantee quality. Like, it can feel totally maddening as to know what to buy, what's worth it. It feels like we don't know what our actual tastes are anymore versus the things that are being imposed on us by places like social media. And so anytime I see a phenomenon like the Rose sample sale, I think it's a really good chance to kind of step back and try to think critically about everything that's at play here so we can sort of navigate this space with a little bit more, thoughtfulness and rationality. If you didn't know, the Rose is a clothing brand, apparel, accessories founded by Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen that for many years now has been kind of one of the brands that is often invoked to typify what is referred to as quiet luxury. We've mentioned it on many different videos. We even mentioned it in our most recent video essay when we were talking about the kind of aesthetic of minimalism as a way to signal affluence in a time of hyperconsumption. But suffice to say, the Rose is probably the most extreme mainstream example that you can get of designer apparel that is intentionally designed to be extremely subtle to the point of total unremarkability. I said in a TikTok that I made about this a couple days ago that in the best case scenario, a lot of the Rose products look like something that you would buy at Uniqlo. But for people who value a certain aesthetic, like, it definitely has not just a cult following, but it has achieved a level of sort of mainstream notoriety and recognizability that in many ways is kind of counterintuitive with the intentionally hyper subtle appearance of a lot of its clothes. This is not to say that they are the only brand that engages in this like ultra subtle sort of design aesthetic. You have brands like Loro Piana and Brunello Cucinelli, which are also intentionally very discreet. I always like to say that aesthetically, Brunello Cucinelli for women is like if Ann Taylor clothes cost, $8,000. But it is sort of a very like winking in-group signaling of like, if you know what this stuff is, you are sort of a member of an elite kind of tranche of society and of fashion consumers, let's say. That's sort of always been their positioning, is like, if you know, this is quiet luxury. Now, I think that there are a lot of issues with this to begin with, right? Like I have said before that the entire concept of quiet luxury is sort of a non-starter because ultimately, as it's expressed and sort of understood through social media, basically any kind of wealth, especially extreme wealth that is communicating itself via social media is like inherently not quiet, right? And even if it is more discreet, like paying $1,000 for a basic white t-shirt or whatever the case may be, like that screams. There's nothing quiet about that. But it is definitely, as opposed to something like, let's say, a Gucci monogrammed belt or, a Louis Vuitton tote bag or, even a designer that may not have a logo on something but is very sort of recognizable in its aesthetic, like a Versace or a Dolce & Gabbana. Like it's considered more subtle. And it also, I think, within the concept of quiet luxury, sort of it signals to a more discerning customer, which I think is often very much wrapped up in a lot of other pretty openly nefarious sort of status markers about who is quiet luxury, who is subtle wealth versus who is perceived as nouveau riche. I think a lot of this is tied up with things like race, body type, your ethnic background or your family background. Like for most of us, if you Google terms like quiet luxury aesthetic, etc., old money aesthetic, you are almost always going to get people that are not just white, but often look like the kind of white that you would find in like a Ralph Lauren catalog from the 80s. So I think even if quiet luxury were possible, and I don't think it really is in the context that we're talking about it, because it sort of self-defeats as soon as it's being, demonstrated actively or being imitated. I think it's kind of a nefarious idea to begin with. It also sort of, as we've talked about in previous video essays, lends itself to this idea of like rich people who rich right, and if you're more subtle or you appear more discreet, more humble, etc., that you are somehow a more palatable type of ultra wealthy person. In fact, I think it's sort of the opposite. Like it really bothers me when I'm in like Silicon Valley and you have a bunch of men who are worth tens of millions of dollars walking around in schlubby t-shirts. I'm like, you should at least have to dress nice so it's nice to look at. But all of that aside, the Row sample sale, basically the Row did a massive sale of its inventory over the past few weeks. You had people camping, paying people to wait in lines, and social media was flooded with haul videos of people showing everything they bought. Now, a lot of these items were marked down 70-80% from retail. Now, I would argue that they were already so hyperinflated to begin with, but you would often have someone showing like a very basic looking blazer that you might find at like a Zara that was originally, let's say, $6,000-$7,000 marked down to like $1,000. And so everyone was sort of marveling over these, really extraordinary deals that they got. Now, some of the clothes you could sort of argue from a construction perspective like have the potential to be ultra luxury clothing. But then a lot of it was just like, plastic flip-flops, what looked like, shower caddy bags. Like a lot of the stuff, even just from like a materials and construction perspective, I'm certainly no expert in the apparel business, but it's very, very hard to believe anything about it is truly luxurious. But what was very obvious by the kind of saturation of I went to the Row, I got a bunch of stuff for ultra discount, let's talk about it, is that sort of the very existence of this sample sale, just like talking about quiet luxury on the internet didn't like sort of cancels out being quiet luxury or being old money. Having a massive sample sale where hordes of people, influencers and sort of regular Joe Schmoes alike can go and buy bags and bags and bags full of this merchandise for, a heavy, heavy discount, that sort of necessarily conveys that it's not super exclusive, that there isn't like the ultra limited inventory that you would have with like a truly ultra luxury product, and that it's kind of available, accessible, and desirable to the unwashed masses. And I think that's kind of the most striking thing with the Row, because given that a lot of the clothes just sort of look like something you would buy at Uniqlo, kind of like with a Brunello Cucinelli or a Loro Piana, the value proposition then becomes, well, this is recognizable, maybe not to everyone walking down the street, but it is recognizable to a super elite in-group. But basically now everyone recognizes the row, especially because of things like the sample sale and the social media saturation. So even that value proposition of being this kind of very sort of insider club is nonsense, essentially. I want to say that I understand that I am not like personally a designer fashion consumer, so a lot of this is kind of necessarily not going to apply to me. I'm not the target audience for it. But I do think that the obsession with what for many people represents a sort of quiet luxury aesthetic, even to the point of buying it in bulk at discount, really conveys a lot about what we value culturally in the things that not only we are putting on our bodies, but that we are investing money into. Because to be clear, even at a very heavy discount, these are still very expensive items for most people. And unless you are sort of in a very ultra privileged tax bracket, that's still going to represent a really, really disproportionate amount of your budget, which is, by the way, I should say, one of the reasons why like pretty much all of the brand partners that you see us work with on the channel are like, you know, budgeting apps and investment brokerages and financial advisors. All the ones we recommend, by the way, are linked below. Because ultimately, if you are going to do something smart with your money, first and foremost, it should be growing it, investing it, saving it, doing things that are sort of generally not consumerist with it. This is not to say I don't ever engage in consumerism. I certainly do. But there needs to be a level of thoughtfulness with it, and it needs to be most importantly balanced with an overall kind of healthy budget. And these purchases that we were seeing, even again at a very steep discount from a place like the Row, for most people, unless you are very wealthy, is not part of a healthy budget. Like, it just isn't. And we mentioned in the video essay, about 27% of luxury sales come from people making less than $50,000 a year. Now, I think there's a lot of things that go into that. Credit card debt being one, gifting being another, buying the sort of most inexpensive item at a very inexpensive store being another, but also the fact that even these sort of theoretically very exclusive luxury brands are having to engage in very, very deep discount sales because ultimately they have to move merchandise, and the merchandise has been sort of inflated so exponentially that in order to get a huge amount of consumers to buy it, they're going to have to do these massive discounts, which again, to me, sort of inherently undercuts any notion of real exclusivity or real luxury, because you would simply just not have enough stock for hundreds of people to be walking away with a pair of shoes from your sample sale at an 80% discount if everything was being made to that level of quality and intentionality. But people, and I'm not going to generalize here, but again, a lot of this is really targeted toward women, have gotten very comfortable with spending in a way that is totally disproportionate to their budget, doesn't make sense for their finances, and doesn't even really make sense for their lifestyle or their personal sense of style when it comes to clothes. We also point out in the video essay that Gen Z is spending way more on luxury than previous generations, millennials also spending more on it than previous generations, but Gen Z even more so. And I think most of that is social media. Like, I think part of the reason why so many influencers, and I have suspicion that some of this had to be like undisclosed SpawnCon, but part of the reason I think that so many young people have gotten so much more used to buying these kind of products, even if they're totally out of whack with their budgets, is because they see influencers doing it, is because they see other people on social media wearing these things, showing what they got. There's a sort of, not only is there a community-oriented aspect, kind of a very insidious community, but you're part of a club now if you are also buying these products and can show them off, but it becomes a performance. It's for public consumption, not just when you're sharing the thing that you bought, but you're putting it on yourself and doing the outfit reveal and wearing different outfits each day and sharing that. These are all kind of very socially ingrained habits now for young people, again, especially young women, that simply didn't exist 10 or 20 years ago. And you could argue that when it's like, I'm trying the crumble cookies of the week, like, it is still very hyper-consumerist and probably not great for your body, but at least for most people, it could theoretically fit in their budgets. When you're talking about something like what is theoretically ultra-luxury fashion, you are talking about something that is extremely financially unsustainable for most people who are seeing it, which is, again, why you are seeing these explosions in things like consumer debt. And I also want to say what's really troublesome to me about the concept of luxury fashion in particular, and this is not to say that there is no such thing as luxury fashion, but that it is rarer and rarer to truly find pieces that you could consider genuinely luxurious. The Row is a great example. So it is actually really difficult to find a ton of detailed information on their production standards, but you can find tons of videos about like their pieces falling apart, being poorly constructed, using really poor sewing and assembly methods. They've gotten bad ratings over and over on things like their labor practices. Like on most levels, you can just say, just from a purely sort of material perspective, this isn't really a luxury product. Again, if it was, I don't think they could be doing such a massive sample sale. But we can see this kind of across the board with a lot of quote unquote luxury products, is that we are seeing the price tags without the production. We are seeing pieces that are, hundreds, thousands of dollars that were made in very similar conditions, if not literally in the same factories as actual fast fashion. And to me, I think that is where it becomes kind of most dystopian, most kind of unsettling to me, because you could at least argue with something like, I don't know, it's not my space, but my husband really likes cars. He's a big Formula One fan. We don't have a car, but he loves thinking about them and learning about them. And he could definitely point out to you ways in which certain luxury vehicles are a genuinely luxurious product, not just in terms of the experience of the driver, but the actual construction of the vehicle itself. It's part of why he loves the Formula One sport so much, is because it's really almost as much about the engineering as it is about the actual driving. So I think that there are many examples of luxury products where there is some level of actual sort of luxury material and construction. Now, do I think the prices are always totally lined up with the superior product? No, absolutely not. There's still a great amount of inflation going on. But I think there are genuinely material differences in a lot of product categories. And again, sometimes in clothing there still is, but it is rarer and rarer. And the sort of perceived luxury of an item or the perceived value of an item is becoming so far removed from the actual value of that item that, to me, I honestly don't know where this could possibly lead, except for, I guess essentially everything being fast fashion and just having different price points based on the perceived sort of cachet of a brand name. Like, I really don't know where we go with this. And I think the rise of fast fashion is in many ways directly responsible for this, in the sense that not only has it put enormous pressure on the fashion industry as a whole to keep up with completely unsustainable demand and production schedules, but it also has totally desensitized people to what quality is. And that is why, like, in the video, what we talk about so much is like, they've done study after study that show that, like, for example, the durability and the longevity of a garment have much more to do with how well you maintain it and how you take care of it. If you're able to properly clean it, to repair it if needed, to store it properly out of season, etc., than it is about the actual price of the garment. But people tend to take better care of things that they spent more money on, so they sort of falsely correlate this idea that just because something was more expensive, that is why it's lasting longer. No, it's actually likely because you are putting in more effort to caring for it properly. And if we were caring for everything we had with such a level of intentionality, even the less expensive items would probably last longer. But also, when we think about what luxury actually is, one of the things that really struck me watching those Row sample sale videos was like, how the items didn't even look good on that person. Often they weren't the perfect size because they were, frantically searching through a bunch of like chaotic sample sale items and just trying to buy what they could. So they weren't able to buy the proper size. Sometimes it just clearly didn't fit their body very well. It didn't really go with their personal sense of style or look like, it fit into their closet. And that's kind of leaving aside how sort of not very luxurious a lot of the materials and construction seemed. And that to me is sort of the saddest thing of all, right? Because what makes an item of clothing luxurious is how much use you get out of it, how well it fits you, is it tailored to you, is the material comfortable, and does it feel good against the skin, does it fit nicely in the rest of your wardrobe? And to see that, again, because a lot of it was bought for reasons totally decoupled from the actual experience or quality of the item, that none of these criteria were being met, like, in my opinion, even if that were a truly luxurious item, it is not luxurious to you because it doesn't fit your life. It doesn't fit your body. It doesn't fit your budget. And I think I think back to a video I made a few weeks ago for my Having People Over series about things that downgrade your home, both in terms of aesthetic and functionality. And there was kind of some discourse going off in the comments because some people had some of the items that I was talking about. But my point in that video, and my point more generally, is like, nothing is inherently in sort of good or bad taste. Nothing is inherently worth or not worth money. I mean, there are probably a few exceptions to that, but for the most part, all of these things ultimately come down to what you use, what you enjoy, what fits into your life, what is sustainable for your budget. So in the case of that video I made with like things you might have in your home that sort of devalue it, if you actually are valuing that item, if you do get use out of it, if you do love it and it fits in with your life, great, then it is valuable to you. It is an upgrade to you. But I think, social media especially has really reinforced this idea that inspiration is not enough and that we need to engage in mimicry. You can't just see something and take a little bit from here and a little bit from there and find a way that it fits into your own life financially, aesthetically, and otherwise, that you have to just simply copy and paste it. And I remember when we interviewed Heather Hurst for the channel a couple years ago, she had said that one of the most important things when it comes to determining your own taste, your own sense of style, etc., was to really decouple the notion that in order to benefit from something or appreciate something, that you have to own it, that you have to buy it. A good example is going to a museum. You can go to a museum, look at beautiful works of art, appreciate them, integrate them into your taste, learn something from them, be shaped by them as a person in a meaningful way, and never own that item. And I think that when you look at the Row as an example, and you especially look at this sample sale, which even though it still realistically shouldn't be accessible to most budgets, did briefly make an extremely financially inaccessible brand a little bit more financially accessible. And you saw the kind of scrum to be a part of that and to show that off. It really does show that, like, I hate to say it, but like brain-wormed approach to things where it's like, I must have this just because I saw someone else have it, or because, I liked a photo of it, or whatever the case, even if it doesn't properly fit, even if I have to put it on credit cards, even if I have to own it. And not only do I have to own it, I have to show people that I own it. And I think that is an impulse that we need to get away from as much as possible. There are going to be things that we buy that have value to us. For most of us, clothes will be one of them, right? Like, we usually have to wear clothes. And there are going to be things that we buy that feel really special to us, and maybe they are more expensive, and maybe we do love showing them to people or sharing them or whatever the case may be. But it has to be meaningful to you. It has to be meaningful to your life and to your taste. And while I'm not opposed to the idea that some people really do aesthetically value something like the Row, that aesthetic quite literally can be achieved without ever purchasing the Row itself. The value of the Row comes from all of those brand connotations and the sort of social media hype and, the celebrity/influencer effect. If all you want is like a boxy navy blue blazer and a white t-shirt, there's a million ways to do that are more sustainable, that probably will fit you better, and that will be part of your wardrobe as it's adapted to you. At the end of the day, like, my major point with the video essay was like, we are in a time of such hyperabundance and such cheapening of basically everything that comes into our life that it feels like we are essentially solving for a puzzle anytime we want to truly invest in something, truly experience quality, know what is the right decision for us. And it is not always going to be right. Like, I posted recently on Instagram that I had bought a black leather tote bag from Suzanne like 2 years ago, not even 2 years ago, and it is falling apart, completely falling apart. Like, I got hoodwinked. Like, I spent $460 on that bag and it was nowhere even close to worth that. And in their defense, I am like emailing with their corporate team and they are, doing what they can to make it right. I will not be getting another leather product from them for what it's worth. But like, I got it wrong. I was like lured in by the aesthetic. I had heard good things about their leather goods. I bought something that I thought would be a long-term piece for me, and it was a mistake. It fell apart. that will happen, because even something as expensive as like a $460 purse, which most people would assume would be at least decently constructed leather, like that doesn't always mean it's good anymore. I will note though that I have bought a few pieces over the years from Portland Leather Company. They've never done me wrong. Their leather is excellent quality, and their products are really well constructed for not even a third of what I paid for that bag that fell apart. Another good example that price doesn't always correlate with how good an item is. But I say that to say, like, it happens to me too. I get buyer's remorse too. I buy things that look great, but maybe don't necessarily have the quality level. And those mistakes will be made because there aren't really good ways to tell anymore. You kind of have to figure it out yourself, which is why I really like my guest Elliot Dupre in the video mentions that part of the reason that brick and mortar has kind of been going away is because in terms of quality, and we've really seen a decline in that sort of mid-range category, is because people are no longer going into stores to actually feel garments, to assess quality with their own senses. And so there's no longer as much of an incentive for a lot of these brands to invest in that quality, because when you're just looking at it on a screen, you know, a button-down shirt from H&M and a button-down shirt from, you know, Madewell or Banana Republic or whatever the case may be are going to look exactly the same. So we also kind of have to take it upon ourselves to use our own senses, use our own judgment when it comes to quality, but there will be mistakes. But I do think, and I really don't like to get into what feels like shaming people for their purchasing decisions, because if there really was some particular piece from the row that was really, 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 really meaningful to you and you were able to get it through the sample sale, like, you shouldn't feel bad about that, and I don't want you to. But I have a suspicion that for every one person that may be true of, like, hundreds of people probably bought something or were made to desire something for completely artificial, typically social media driven reasons. And as I said at the beginning of the video, like, quiet luxury, like, none of us will ever be quiet luxury. Like, that jig is up. That, like, there are probably some people out there who are genuinely engaging in quiet luxury. We will never know them or see them or meet them, like, kind of by nature of them actually being old money / quiet luxury. Like, we can give up that ghost. We don't have to keep trying for that. And just because something is more subtle does not mean it is more classy or chic or valuable. What is classy or chic or valuable, in my opinion, is just doing things that are true for you. Again, based on your own life and budget. So I really want, especially for the young women who feel kind of inundated with this nonsense and increasingly sort of fatigued by how much effort it feels like it takes just to get things that aren't bad quality, and to maintain their own inner sense of style in the midst of all of this noise and nonsense. Like, I hear you. I experience it as well. Every time I see haul videos on my feed, like that, I think there was one by like that makeup girl, Michaela, where she bought like dozens and dozens of, let's be clear, very loud luxury items. And I thought that was just as, you know, kind of off-putting to watch. But this stuff does infect our brains. It does alter our perception. And when you watch those videos that are like, I got this $7,000, what looks like, you know, the Gap jacket for only $1,200, you're like, wow, they got a deal. Like, it's hard to not have that little flash in your mind, because the human brain is trained to think that way. That's why sales are so effective and so heavily used. But please try, when you are shopping for clothes, when you're shopping for anything, but especially for clothes, remember, there is nothing that you can buy that will be more luxurious than something that just fits you, looks good on you, and is comfortable to wear, you know? And that you can do at basically any price point. And that comes down way more to you taking care of it than how much you spent on it. So yeah, watch the video essay if you haven't already. It'll be linked below. If you want to support us and have been thinking about getting your budget together, we really recommend Monarch. I use it every day. If you've been wanting to invest, we love and use Betterment. And if you've been wanting to talk to a financial advisor, check out advisor.com. All of them are linked below. Please be smart with your money. Please don't waste it on nonsense. And if you do, at least make it cute nonsense. I don't know. Bye, guys.